Okay, folks, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa la aqibatul muttaqin, wa la udwana illa ala al-zalimin, wa salawatullahi wa salamuhu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursalin, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla, wa anta tajul al-hazna idha shi'ta sahla. Allahumma a'inna ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husna ibadatik ya rabbil kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. What on earth else did you think it was, Salma and Ulfa? You guys are asleep, man. Qassam. Come on, man. The greatest single avatar in history. Although I've never been able to work out how to change our individual ones. Assalamu alaikum, Ahlul Ghanna, and Ahlul London, and Ahlul Memphis, and Ahlul Houston, and Ahlul Everybody, and Alina, and Maysara, and Noor, and Auntie Shakila, and then Baji Amal from good old Yorkshire, Ijlal from Vancouver, Aisha Muqaddam. Yeah, where is that? Actually, you have to remind me, man. And then Chaudhry, peace from the Middle East of London, you sick guy. And then Saadiya, and then Suhail, and Mahira from Michigan, from New York State, whatever, New Jersey, New York, whatever. Danish, you got to work it out, bro. You got to work it out. Sima, and all the new folks. We have new people as well. Those people finally realized, Yani, that for the 15th time when we were telling them that there's a program on Telegram and class and stuff, they said, oh yeah, you know what, let's join. Qassam, man, it's classic. Every time we send an email out, that's what happens. I told Chaz to get rid of the email system, but it's not happening. Yeah, Ahlan wa Sahlan Mahira from Windsor. Well, to be honest, I miss Windsor. Ambassador Bridge, Windsor, weather, little cheeky Tim Hortons, and a bit of food, this, that, whatever, a bit of Dairy Queen. Some miss me a bit of Canada. Yeah. Anyway, chalo. Alright, folks. We are in the middle, right in the middle. By the way, how sick is the app? Use the email associated with your account and upload your picture there. Wow, Gravatar. Interesting. I intend to, Mahira, one way or the other. I intend to. Right. By the way, Mahira, you know Usama? Oh no, that's the other Usama. Okay. All right, folks. We're in the middle of the section that men are obligatory upon the men to attend the congregation or perform the prayer in congregation. Is someone going to put me the text up on the screen? What's going on? Someone put this text on the screen for me, number one. Number two, how sick is the new app? And the fact that on the app, you can actually choose the page number in the text that you want. Honestly, so impressive. I was bamboozled by that. It's better than the one you got here. You can't do that to the one here, I don't think. Now my best is going to be done, obviously. Harith, right. So we are in تلزم الرجال للصلوات الخمس لا شرط وله فعلها في بيته. Maybe we'll get to وتستحب صلاة أهل الثغر في مسجد واحد. Maybe we'll get to that. Alaikum salam, Arif. Arif, we've been missing you for so long. Harith, now you are officially Haris now for the entire rest of the class. You are full Haris. How on earth, Yani, do you guys not know? You're here every week. The Telegram group is put on this group every single week. We post about nothing else but other than the Apple app and Android. I should let you know, Ijlal. Anyway, back to Arif. Arif, where on earth have you been? Arif Habibi? By the way, Arif, you're meant to be supervising that translation of Nur al-Basair. Bro, I need you to come through on that. Alright. So, okay. Honestly, man, he's been lollygagging. That's the word. That's the word of the day, lollygagging. What a sick word. Canadians come up with the sickest words. Right. So, it is required for men to pray in congregation for the 5 daily prayers. but it is not a condition. It can be prayed in his house. This is the Hanbali mainstream position, and that's what we're going to be. We started covering that last week. We spoke a bit about whatever we spoke about. Yeah, we said that some of the scholars said that it is a sunnah, and others said XYZ. Others said it's just permissible. And of course, the Hanbali position and Sheikh Uthaymeen's position is that it's absolutely obligatory. Okay? Absolutely obligatory. So be aware of that. Okay? He carries on then. Right at the top of page 141, we're going to have a nice productive lesson. By the way, just in case I forget at the end, next week lesson is being changed. The time, be aware, it's going to be the same time but on Monday. You know, we do sometimes these one-offs when I'm traveling. I'm traveling on the Wednesday at the time of the lesson, so it's going to have to be Wednesday, next Monday on the 31st. Bloody 31st. Yeah, I nearly said 31st of February. That nearly was me. 28th of February. Yeah, the 28th of February is going to be at 8:30 p.m. UK time. So same time, but just different day. Alright, folks? Alright? So we're going to make sure we remind ourselves to do that again. Anyway, if you're on the app, page 141 of the commentary. And if you're not on the app, then good luck to find page 141 in the Arabic. And if you don't know what the app is or the text is or the Arabic is, then just enjoy the ride. Just enjoy the ride. Surey Baji, honestly, man, you go to Cairo when I'm in England. Honestly. Right. Sheikh says that when the author has said that it is absolutely obligatory, all right, this would indicate that this is the case both at home and away, meaning as a resident, what we call muqim, non-traveler, and then in safar, when you are musafir, when you are a traveler. And Sheikh says that when he's saying that it's absolutely required from the men, then this would mean in travel times as well. لأنها لم يقيدها في الحضر, because he didn't specify that this is only for when you're at home. And when you don't specify something in fiqh, then we understand it to be taken in a general form. And if it's in a general form, then it applies to everything, home and away. Unless you say specifically required from men at home. So Sheikh says that, so therefore it is obligatory for the congregation to be established even during travel. Even during travel. And the evidences for that are the generality of all the evidences we've said so far that made it obligatory in the first place. Why not? Because it didn't exclude travel. It should have. Those evidences that we've been covering over the last couple of weeks, they should, if they were not applied or not applicable to travel, it should say only at home, not whilst traveling. It didn't. Therefore, the obligation is across the board, even in travel, according to Sheikh Uthaymeen and according to a number of the Hanabila as well. وَأَيْضًا, and then there are other evidences that are specific. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded His Prophet, إِذَا كَانَ فِيهِمْ فِي الْجِهَادِ, that when they are in jihad, that they establish the jama'ah. And it is absolutely obvious, anyone who knows history knows that the Prophet ﷺ, that virtually all of the jihad that he conducted was whilst traveling, in a state of travel. So therefore, Sheikh Uthaymeen says that the congregation is obligatory away whilst you're traveling as a musafir, just as it is when you are at home. Likewise, another evidence is that the Prophet ﷺ continuously used to pray in jama'ah when he was traveling, even to the extent that when he missed the Fajr prayer, and they all missed it, Bilal radiallahu and the Mu'adhin overslept, Prophet ﷺ overslept, everybody overslept, they're out there in the wild on a journey. Then he woke up, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then when he woke up after sunrise, he told everybody get up, and he told everybody pray as you see me praying, meaning that make the adhan, let's pray sunnah, let's pray jama'ah. So they prayed even a gone prayer, qadha prayer, as a jama'ah. Okay? Alright. The author said, لِلصَّلَوَاتِ الْخَمْسِ, for the 5 prayers, obligatory to attend the congregation or make in congregation for the 5 prayers. Obligatory. The Jama'ah is obligatory for the 5 prayers. Obligatory for the 5 prayers, not obligatory in the 5 prayers. Okay? So it's obligatory for the prayer, not in the prayer. An obligation in the prayer is like the takbiratul intiqal. You know, it's, Allahu Akbar when you go to ruku', or Allahu Akbar between the sujuds, or Allahu Akbar when you're standing up, or the tashahhud, for example, the first tashahhud, right, that you pray. These are all obligations in the salah. An obligation for the salah is something else. This is the Jama'ah is an obligation for the salah, like a straight line is an obligation for the salah, and so on and so forth. Okay, you might say, isn't an obligation for an act of worship or for the salah the same as a condition? Answer is no, because an obligation for something means that it has to happen before, and when it happens before, if you don't do it, you are sinful. However, the prayer is valid. Whereas if it is a condition, a shart, upgraded from wajib or obligation to the higher level of condition, shart, prerequisite, precondition, if you didn't do that, then there's no prayer afterwards. It's like you didn't fulfill the prerequisites. Whereas if we say you didn't fulfill the obligations beforehand, what that means is that the prayer will be acceptable, but it's not it's acceptable. You will have achieved sin. You will be sinful for not praying it in Jama'ah, but the prayer is valid. You do not need to repeat it again. That is what Shaykh Uthaymeen's position is, and that's what he's explaining. Now, he goes, as for Salawat al-Khams, the author says 5 prayers, right? You know, I keep forgetting the text, man. It is required for men to pray in congregation for the 5 daily prayers. For the 5 daily prayers. 5 daily prayers. Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. No other prayer than that. But there are other obligatory prayers, right? So a prayer, for example, which is at the bottom, he says, Al-Mandhura. Al-Mandhura is the prayer which you have vowed to pray. If I pass my exam, I swear, I vow that I will offer 2 rak'ah nafil. If you go and get a haircut, I will pray 2 rak'ah nafil. If you go on a diet, I will pray 2 rak'ah nafil. That's a vow. It's a qasam. You have to do that. That's obligatory. That's obligatory to perform that prayer because you have sworn by it. But it's not the same level as the obligatory prayers of the day. Shaykh Uthaymeen says if there were 2 people that swore 2 similar vows, maybe there's 2 mates and they say, I swear if I pass the exam, I'm praying 2 rak'ah. The other guy goes, well, that's true, man. If I swear, if I pass the exam, you know, I blagged it all in during the revision. Shukran lillah, or gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ah as well. 100%. So then they pass the exams and they say, right, okay, I've got to pray 2, you got to pray 2. If they decided to pray them in congregation, like together, which some scholars would allow, this is something which they do not need to. Sorry. Let me start again. Now that they've both there at the same time, same place, they kind of saying, right, oh, I've got to pray in congregation. Answer is no. You do not need to pray this in congregation. It's not every obligatory prayer. The Jumu'ah prayer is a replacement of the Dhuhr prayer, so that doesn't count. And the prayer for the eclipse, the majority of the scholars consider that to be a Sunnah prayer. Yeah. And Sheikh says, وَلَا تَجِبُ لِلنَّوَافِلِ. And it's also not obligatory for the supererogatory prayers, the non-obligatory prayers. It's not obligatory for that. So for example, if a person wants to pray some extra prayers, then it's not necessary for him to pray that in congregation. It's not necessary. It's not obligatory. Okay? Not obligatory. Question, Sheikh says, is it allowed to pray non-obligatory prayers in Jama'ah, or is that a bid'ah? Sheikh says obviously there's some details to this. So there are some nafil prayers which it is legislated. It is legislated to pray them in Jama'ah. For example, Salatul Istisqa, which is the prayer for rain, or Salatul Kusuf. And Shaykh Uthaymeen makes the point that's of course based upon the opinion that it is a sunnah, because you know that some consider it to be an obligation. So if you consider that Salatul Kusuf as a sunnah, then this is another example of it, okay? And Qiyamul Layl in Ramadan, so Tahajjud or Tarawih, whatever you want to call it, when you're praying it with someone or whoever, these are prayers for which the Jama'ah is legislated, so it's prayed. That's fine. It's not obligatory though. وَمِنَ النَّوَافِلْ مَا لَا تُسَنُّ لَهُ الْجَمَاعَةِ. But then there are other supererogatory prayers, non-obligatory prayers, for which the Jama'ah is not legislated, such as the Rawatib prayers. Those are the Sunnah prayers that are linked to the Fard prayers. The 2 Sunnah before Fajr, the 2 before Dhuhr, the 2 after Isha, the 2 whatever. The Kusuf is the eclipse prayers, the eclipse. Yeah. And Shaykh Uthaymeen says also the night prayer outside of Ramadan. This is not one of the prayers that is prayed in congregation. However, if he prays it in congregation here and there, and we had a big discussion about what here and there means, Ahyanan, non-organized, non-announced, and that's why the whole youth qiyam kind of thing where you announce it a couple of weeks in advance, there's a bit of a, that's a bit dodgy, to be honest. However, you're praying, you come to the mosque, the mosque's open 24/7, and then you tap next guy on the shoulder and you pray together. Or someone's at home, family member, for example, wakes up and you find a family member praying already, so you join him, or join her, whatever. Okay, so those are examples of how it is legislated to be performed. And now, of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he did that. It happened to him with Abdullah ibn Abbas in his home, and also he prayed with Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman radiyallahu ta'ala anhu as well, and also Abdullah ibn Mas'ud once joined the Prophet ﷺ in the night prayer outside of Ramadan, normal tahajjud prayer. Okay, that's the last one. We've already mentioned the previous ones before. You want some references? We did it before, but page 60, the reference. Let's have a look. Ibn Abbas, narrated by Imam al-Bukhari, hadith number 698, when he prayed with Hudhayfa ibn Yaman, narrated by Imam Ahmad, and narrated by Imam Abu Dawood, hadith number in Abu Dawood 871. By the way, you might have noticed, Mesa will have known obviously, but others might not have noticed, that I rarely give the reference to the riwayah from the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. All right, I always give I give an Abu Dawood or an Nasa'i or other references. The reason why I don't give references from Imam Ahmad is because they're using the old school Ahmad Shakir edition, which is volume number, page number, which is a bit difficult to find, whereas hadith number is easier, it's more universal across the editions. So that, just so that people know that for the future. And then he prayed with Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh. That's also narrated by Imam Bukhari. That hadith is number 1135. Okay, so you've got different evidences for that. Should your son lead the youth qiyam? Should I discourage him from it? That's a difficult question, man. Someone will remember the big discussion and give you the link. It wasn't that long ago. I bet you were in the lesson as well. It wasn't that long ago when we spoke about this. Okay, so that's something which is allowed, but there's a lot of discussion about it. I'm not altogether a massive fan of it, but I wouldn't say it's haram or bid'ah. I do lean towards maybe that there's a problem with it, but someone who is a hafiz or practicing their Quran and so on and so forth, it's difficult, man. I don't like to answer this question because I wouldn't do it myself and I don't like it, but I don't want to put that upon people because I recognize the benefit and I don't recognize it's the most haram thing in the world, and so just find the link and go back to that. I wouldn't say no, discourage him from it. That's a different game, man. When the son's leading it. I'm talking about the flipping little prison that they all go to, University of Crime, and they go there and spend all night praying, flipping God knows what. So that's a good question. I think it's okay that they pray their night prayer every night together. I think that's okay. But you should tell them to mix it up as well. you should tell him to mix it up. That the asl is that the night prayer is prayed by oneself. The asl is not a congregation. The asl meaning like the original kind of status, the original form of the night prayer is that it's a quiet individual private prayer. It's not meant to be prayed together. So they can, like set up a system that, once a week or once every so and so, days or whatever, they do that. Fatima, everybody does that now. All the masajid do that now, following the kind of, masajid that have got young folks. And like I said, Fatima, someone put up the link, man, because everyone's keep asking the same question. Yeah, because we covered this in a lot of detail. I think it was a lot of detail. I think. All right. Right. And Sheikh Uthaymeen says, and sometimes it's allowed, وأحيانا, it's allowed sometimes to pray general sunnah other than the night prayer in jama'ah. That's allowed sometimes. But it can't be like a sunnah with a specific reason. But if there's like a sunnah that, like for example, there's a couple of lads just walking down somewhere, whatever, and take a pause. You've got 1-2 hours to kill and say, hey, let's pray some sunnah. Then that can be led as a jama'ah. Because there's no prayer that sunnah is linked to, no reason is being linked to. It is what we call a nafl al-mutlaq or salat mutlaq, al-mutlaqa, yani, meaning that it is like a undefined general nafl prayer. This can be prayed in congregation here and there. And one of the evidences for that is the action of the Prophet ﷺ, actually a number of times. He once prayed with Anas and his mother Sulaim and the orphan that they were looking after as well. So he prayed with them in a jama'ah. That's narrated by Imam al-Bukhari, hadith number 380. And also he once went to the house of Itban ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And the house of Itban, he was quite far away and he wanted basically like a prayer kind of zone established, not just for his house but for his area. So he doesn't have the ability and the resources and whatever to have a masjid, but he wants to have like a mihrab. He wants to have like a prayer corner, niche, significant kind of prayer presence in his home. And so he invited the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ then came and he prayed بِمَكَانِ يَتَّخِذُهُ إِدْبَانْ مُصَلَّى فَفَعَلْ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم, meaning that he said to him, where is it that you pray? And Itban said, right here. If you can make this area like a musalla, like a bless it, like make it like something special, like formalize it. And so he led the prayer, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hadith narrated by Bukhari, hadith number 424. All right. Sheikh again clarifying the 5 daily prayers. He says, what's obvious from this statement, the 5 daily prayers, that it's obligatory for men to perform this 5 daily prayers in congregation. Sheikh says that there's no difference between whether that prayer is offered on time or whether it's a missed prayer. Yeah? It is mu'adda or maqdiyya. Mu'adda or maqdiyya. فالمؤدى المؤدى is that prayer which is offered in its right time. Just every prayer that's offered in its right time. This is this we call this concept ada. When you say in Urdu faraz ada karo or ya ada karo or whatever, complete it, do it. And it means that it's been completed and done. Addayt al-salah, you have completed the salah correctly, all requirements in its right time. That's in normal time. And the as for the maqdiya, as for the qada, then that's what we call qaza. Yeah, qaza. So the qaza prayer, Pax call it qaza. That's qada or maqdiya. That's referring to the prayer that basically the time has gone. And so therefore, for example, if you were all out there in the wild, then the Prophet and you all overslept, and then suddenly just woke up and it was past sunrise, then then you would all get up and that prayer would be considered a qada because it is after the time. And Sheikh says that according to our statement of our author, the congregation is to be applied across the board. It's a general obligation, no exceptions. Therefore, for the missed prayer, which is late, past its time, as well as for the prayer which is on its time, the congregation is a requirement. Sheikh Sheikh Uthaymeen, well done, Maisa, Jazakumullah khair. Awesome work. The Sheikh Uthaymeen says, by the way, Sheikh goes, I agree with this entirely, that the obligation of the congregation is to be applied to all prayers, whether it's missed, qaza prayer, or whether it's being prayed on its time. However, he wants to correct the notion, as was the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, other scholars differed. He wants to correct the notion of what defines a missed prayer. He goes, this is not a missed prayer. This prayer is not called qada. If you all missed the Fajr, for example, as a group, and then as a group you missed it, and then you all woke up at the same time, this is actually ada. You are performing it in its right time. It's right time because for you, this is the only time that you had to actually pray it. You didn't miss it on purpose. You didn't delay it. And you have a legitimate legal excuse to not being in sin. It's a disaster, but it's not a sin what you did. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, من نام عن صلاة أو نسيها فليصليها إذا ذكرها لا كفارة لها إلا ذلك. That whoever oversleeps a prayer or forgets it, then let him pray it as soon as he remembers it, and there is no other expiation other than that. That's it. You wake up, you do it, and you just get it done. Right? You just pray the prayer. Okay? And then the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, he then recited وَأَقِمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ, and established the prayer for my remembrance. Okay? This hadith is sahih. Now, I want you to know, what that basically means is that if a person was planning to get up and everything was in place and everything was going good, and then doesn't wake up, and then wakes up later, right? But not out of negligence or not out of any funny behavior or whatever, then when that person wakes up, for them, that is the time of the prayer. Now, the other scholar said, now this makes a mockery of the whole concept of qaza. Just why didn't you just call it qada? And Ibn Taymiyyah responded and said, well, the issue is that once you call it qada, it's got a kind of a negative impact to the prayer and so on, and you didn't actually miss anything because you are not held accountable when you're asleep or when you forget. رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. Yeah? That's the whole point of the ayah, right? And Allah in the hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, done. Yani he responded to that dua. So therefore, when we forget, we're not held accountable for forgetfulness, for ignorance, and sleep comes into that. Yeah? So Ibn Taymiyyah and Shaykh Uthaymeen's opinion, and I have to say I like it as well, this is the class position as well, is that any prayer which, like Asr prayer, which is a prayer that sometimes, people might forget. Is it really? I don't know. Maybe more Dhuhr, maybe. I don't know. You've got a plan to pray it, but then, you just get busy, get hooked up, and then suddenly you realize, and it's Asr time. Oh my God. That's different to, I remembered it at the beginning time, and I said, yeah, I'm going to pray it now, I'm going to pray it now, I'm going to pray it now. That's dodgy behavior. I mean, the day just whizzes past and you kind of completely forgot about Dhuhr. You've forgotten about time changes, forgotten about, day structure, you're traveling between different countries and things like that. Yeah? And you're thinking that it's that time, and then the next day, and so on and so forth. All right? So, yeah. Why is it obligatory to pray in congregation for these missed late prayers and normal prayers? The generality of the evidences. The evidences that we mentioned so far to obligate the congregation are to be applied to this as well. Why are we not applying it? Okay? And also because, specifically speaking, a specific evidence is that this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. When he overslept, he woke up. He then woke up and he was on a journey. That's known as the hadith of Abu Qatada. Okay? Yeah, Asr in winter. I think that's the one. I think in winter, that's what I was thinking of. Now it's getting better now, alhamdulillah. So in the hadith of Abu Qatada, the famous one, he oversleeps, he wakes up, he wakes the rest of them up, he commands Bilal to make the adhan. Then they all pray Fajr Sunnah by themselves. Then they prayed the Fajr like they pray it normally in congregation. And he raised his voice as well. That's another thing, by the way. In this hadith, which is, I'll give you the reference for, page 72, the hadith of Abu Qatada. The hadith of Abu Qatada is narrated by Imam Muslim, hadith number 681. 681. He recited out loud. This is one of the evidences that a person recites out loud by themselves, and also one of the evidences that you recite even the loud prayers by themselves. There's also one of the evidences that you give the iqamah even when the prayer is late. Some said no, that was because he was in a congregation. Others said that it's linked to the prayer. It doesn't matter. That's a different thing. You can go back and look at that in 4 or 5 years ago when we studied that. All right. So that's that. Okay. In the oversleeping example, using the example of sunrise being at 7 a.m. Just say your eyes awoke at 7:30. Do you have to pray then, or are you okay to go back to sleep and read it when you are fully awake? I've answered that before, Harith, okay? We covered that in detail. You got to pray it straight away, even though there are some scholars that said it's gone, and now you've got up until Dhuhr. That used to be the opinion of Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar al-Shanqiti, Hafidhahullah. But it's the exception. The vast majority of scholars says that you have to pray, because the hadith says, فَلْيُصَلِّيَهَا إِذَا ذَكَرَهَا. Let him pray it as soon as he remembers. Right? So that's why the vast majority said you've got to pray immediately. And if you don't pray it immediately, then you're not, you're done for, basically. Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar said no, and he had evidences. You can find it in the previous sessions under prayer times or whatever it was. All right. لا شرط. لا شرط. And Sheikh Uthaymeen says, this is page now 144. He goes, I've got a copy here where it says لا شرطا. And I also have a copy, by the way, a physical copy which says لا شرطا. Right? So, تلزم الرجال للصلوات الخمس لا شرط. But in one riwayah of this text, لا شرطا. Translates as, it is required for men to pray in congregation for the 5 daily prayers, but it is not a condition. Meaning the congregation is not a condition for the prayer. It's not a prerequisite for the prayer. It's not one of those that if you do not pray in congregation, then you don't even have any prayer. Your prayer is cancelled out. Alright? It's just an obligation. Just an obligation. Meaning that you are sinful, but the prayer is still valid. It is not a condition. Now, just on the point of the Arabic, لا شرطا is not accurate. Okay, it's a weak opinion from an Arabic language point of view. But la shartun, as Sheikh Uthaymeen explains, is correct. It is what we call the khabar for the mubtada, which has been hidden, or yani not hidden, but yani it is assumed. La hiya shartun. Here is the word which is assumed in brackets. It is not a condition. It is not a condition. But it is not. It here. It is not. Anyway, that's just Arabic. So it is la shartun. It is not a condition. Alright. Sheikh Uthaymeen says, why would our author say it's not a condition? Why would he say it's obligatory but not a condition? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is because you do need to clarify. A lot of people assume that when something's obligatory, it means it's a condition as well, right? And if it is actually a condition, then that makes it incredibly serious. As I said before, if you don't fulfill your preconditions, then the act is gone. It's so complete. You didn't offer it. You have to make it up another time. If you don't offer it's like wudu. Wudu is a condition for salah. Can you imagine praying salah without wudu? Without wudu? There's no prayer. You can pray the whole prayer. There's no prayer. You're wasting your time. Likewise, they're saying, if you say it's a condition, then anyone who doesn't pray in congregation and prays by themselves, wasting their time. No prayer. Sheikh Uthaymeen says that obviously that needs to be explained. You know, what's what. But the main reason that he said la shartun is because he is establishing the Hanbali opinion within the Hanbali madhab that is the dominant opinion, and it's also the opinion of the vast majority of scholars, in contradistinction to the opinion of some of the other Hanbali scholars in the school. There are a number of scholars in the Hanbali school. And it's a riwayah from Imam Ahmad as well, but not very strong. And it's famously the opinion of Ibn Hazm and Abu Dawud al-Zahiri, the literalist school. And sadly, it is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah as well, that it is a shart, which is a madness. It's a madness. That basically means that if you ever offer your prayer by yourself, you've not prayed. So basically every single person in the world, every single person. Yeah? Think about that. So, have a... Sumera, go back to the lesson and check it out, like we mentioned. The madness of this position is significant. I don't think I need to explain that. I mean, it's a big shout. It's a big shout. Okay? It's a big shout. So, is the opinion, or as I said, of Abu Dawud al-Zahiri. It is a riwayah from Imam Ahmad. It's also the opinion of Ibn Aqil. Ibn Aqil, of course, is one of the imams of the school, one of the pillars and the absolute, kings of the Hanbali school. So that's why Imam al-Hajjawi, the author of this fiqh text, has to go out on the front foot and establish it very clearly. I always said to you before that when these statements are being made that don't seem to be connected to what's being studied, there's often some kind of secret reason or hidden reason behind it, something happening behind the scenes. So, bam, he's basically saying that I've got to say it's not a condition. That's the rest of our school. Yeah, we recognize that some of our colleagues in the school do consider it to be a condition, but we're saying no. So that's where it's coming from. Anyway, this is obviously Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Aqil are Hanabila, and they're taking it from one of the narrations of Imam Ahmad as well. Sheikh Uthaymeen says this is a weak position. This is a weak position. Okay? And what makes it weak is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ said that the prayer in congregation is better than the individual prayer by 27 times. Right? Hadith Sahih Bukhari, which we covered before. To say that one prayer is better than another, al-mufadala, when you say that 27 times prayer is better than the congregational prayer is 27 times better than the single prayer, yeah, then that is a what's it called? That is a an indication that this is valid. How can you compare and say the excellence of this is 27 times better than the excellence of this, and this not be valid? Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Yeah? This has to be valid. Otherwise it's impossible, because then it's zero. If it's zero, like 27 times 0 is 0. 27 times 1 is 27. That's a really good explanation of that. Well done, AE. That's the greatest piece of maths you ever used in your life. Allahu Akbar. I deserve some chocolate for that, you know that? I'm so impressed with myself, mashallah. None of you are impressed with things like that. وهذا دليل واضح على أن صلاة الفضل صحيحة ضرورة أن فيها فضل. Yeah. Anyway, Sheikh Uthaymeen says Ibn Taymiyyah responded to this point. Okay? Ibn Taymiyyah responded to this point. He said that no, this hadith doesn't indicate the that the single prayer, or rather, it doesn't indicate that there's a problem here. Okay? It doesn't indicate there's a problem because this hadith is specific to people who have a legal excuse. So what he's basically saying is that this hadith in its entirety is not actually meant for the masses. This hadith is not to be applied, Ibn Taymiyyah is arguing. The hadith that we all know very famously, that the prayer in congregation is 25 times better than the single one, that is 27 times better than the single one. These are hadith are not for the masses. This is a statement of the Prophet ﷺ explaining what happens to the person who cannot pray in congregation because of legal excuse. Now this is out there. This is left field thinking, okay? Probably we could argue desperate thinking, but Allah knows best. Yeah? His argument is that if a person couldn't attend the Jama'ah because they were ill or injured or X or Y or disabled or whatever it is, that's what this hadith is for. To tell that person that your prayer by yourself at home is allowed and is equal to 1, and praying it properly like it's meant to, if you were proper, is equal to 27 times, is that's what the rest of us get. And he continued and he said, you might find this surprising. This is Ibn Taymiyyah basically. I'm summarizing Ibn Taymiyyah's speech here. Ibn Taymiyyah saying, you might think that this is surprising, but there's no problem with this understanding. Right? You might say that this person is naqis, meaning deficient, because of their physical state or illness, but there's nothing wrong in being deficient. And he gives an interesting example. He said because the Prophet ﷺ described, he goes, so I want you to listen to this, yeah? Shaykh al-Islam bin Taymiyyah, he says, he goes, what's stopping us saying that there's some deficiency with someone who's ill? Someone who's ill, there's no problem saying that they are deficient or that they're deficient in their prayer. What's wrong with that? Why do people need to get emotional about it or whatever? This is like what he's arguing. He's saying that if a person is ill or disabled or X or Y or Z, okay, he's getting one prayer. He's getting one prayer and he's not getting punished for it, but he's only getting a single prayer reward and not the 27 times. Or there might be some other excuse, whatever the excuse is, but but it's deficient and he's got to own it. And he goes, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with calling him deficient anyway? Didn't the Prophet ﷺ say that the woman is deficient in her deen when she's on her menstruation? Does that make the woman any less so? No. Does this make the woman does it make the reason that she couldn't pray, which is the reason for the deficiency, naqisatu deen, yeah? Does this deficiency, naqisatu deen, deficient in religion, does it come for an illegitimate reason? No, it comes from an udhr shar'i. It comes from a legitimate shar'i reason, which is menstruation. So she's not sinful, she's not punished, everything is normal, and she gets the reward for just being patient, blah, blah, blah. But she's still called deficient. She doesn't need to feel deficient, take it on as an emotional kind of reality, but she is deficient. I think what he wants to say in more politically correct language is that what is being offered is deficient. You hear what I'm saying? Alright? So, that whole kind of approach is, I think, something of interest. Now, interesting, meaning whatever. Now, what Naeem mentions, okay, that Ibn Taymiyyah is also narrated to have said that it is a fard kifaya, okay, this is my personal opinion. And it's also my own reading of Al-Majmu' al-Fatawa, okay? Now, there has always, as Naeem mentions, that Imam al-Mardawi, in one of the big Hanbali books, Al-Insaf, which we've had references to in here, does actually narrate that Ibn Taymiyyah had two opinions on the issue. And I'm now going back many years now. We were always very comfortable with the opinion that Fard Kifaya, right? Which means that as long as it is prayed in congregation, and by that we mean the masajid, okay, then it is something which is lifted, the obligation is lifted from the people, and we were comfortable. But then the more and more that you research, okay, and the more and more that you do tahqiq of this, unfortunately, as much as it pains me, because I am Taymiyyah to the core, right, it does seem that this is the more correct and authentic narration from Ibn Taymiyyah. But still, the argument is there. The argument is there that that isn't his position. And I'm not gonna lie, it just feels so non-Taymiyyah like when you listen to his argumentation, right? Because what he's just said doesn't make sense. Like Ibn Uthaymeen says, Sheikh Uthaymeen, he turns around and he goes, that doesn't make any sense. He goes, what about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which we covered a couple of months back, right? That إذا مرض العبد أو سافر كتب له ما كان يعمل مقيما صحيحا. If a Muslim is ill, or he goes on a journey and therefore he's unable to do, and as a result, therefore, he's not able to pray the sunnah, and he's not able to pray the extras that he would if he was at home and he was normal, yeah? It will be written for him everything that he used to do. It will be written for him what he used to do, even when he's not doing it, because this person is regular upon it. Make sense? So how would that then how would that then compute with this hadith? You get the point? Yeah. Also, Ibn Taymiyyah's interpretation, how would that fit with that? It doesn't make any sense. So a person who is praying at home without any issue, okay, because they have a legal issue, then, and they want to go to the Jama'ah, and they used to go to the Jama'ah, and now they can't because of some udhr shari'i, as Ibn Taymiyyah said, they get the reward of the Jama'ah. And Thana is talking about, if they are if they're deficient and it isn't their fault, why are they getting less reward, right? Well, that's dependent. If they are going to the masajid regularly, yeah, and that's their normal kind of action, then they will get the reward. But if they don't go to the masajid, what are you talking about? You can't be expected to be getting a congregation reward if you don't go to the masjid, or don't even pray the congregation at home regularly, and then want the reward for the congregation. That doesn't make sense, does it? But if you are, for example, a woman that's praying congregation every single day at home, I think that she gets the reward because she definitely gets the reward for the prayer, right? You don't make up prayers, do you, when you're menstruating? By the way, I got a question the other day about a woman that had started making up all her prayers for menstruation. Can you believe that? Never assume anything, folks. Never assume anything. There are people out there that get the wrong idea about various different kind of, things in deen, and they go with it. And she was bamboozled when I said, what are you talking about? What are you making up your prayer for? It's only fasting you make up. She goes, what are you on about? For us. Sick guy. So she gets a reward for the prayer, but she can't be wanting the reward for the jama'ah, or unless she prays it all the time. Then she'll get the reward. That's what otherwise, what's the point of this hadith then? What's the point of the hadith? If you get what I'm saying? All right. Yeah. And yeah. So Shaykh Uthaymeen says, and so therefore the correct position in this issue is the position of the majority, and that is that the prayer is correct and authentic and valid, correct and valid, if it's not offered in congregation, right? But he is sinful for leaving the congregation. He is sinful for leaving the obligation. So, sinful for leaving an obligation, which is to pray in congregation, and but the prayer that is offered is valid, does not need to be repeated. He has fulfilled the required contract. Yeah, I need to offer the prayer. Okay. And that's the position of the majority. So that's that. Okay. Now let's have a look at some of these questions here. Let's have a look. Is the woman less rewarded? No, as we just answered. no less reward. Besides Ibn Taymiyyah, Zawan Abu Ya'la mentioned also that salah is batil if not prayed in jama'ah. Yep. As is the case with many other sunnah acts, when a person is regular with an act of worship, but due to X, Y, Z legitimate, they weren't able to. Would women get rewards for the prayers they missed due to menstruation because they had prayed it if it went? Yeah, as long as they were praying it. As long as they are regular. That's the whole point that we need to do. That's coming later, Salma. And if you missed, that's coming later. This is not for now. Ijlal, my wife used to make them up because my mother-in-law made her do that. That's madness. I mean, maybe it's not madness. Maybe, but a woman, if no one's told you and you haven't thought about it and you said, right, I've got to make up the fasting. Well, prayer is more important than fasting and more regular. Why would I not make up the prayer? Okay. In terms of the congregation, I've got to say to you that so Maiz is asking what the class position is. Is the congregation a requirement for the prayer? Is it an obligation for the prayer? Is it a fard for the prayer? Is it a fard kifaya for the prayer? Or is it a sunnah? The majority of the scholars are upon sunnah, from the Malikiyya and Shafi'iyya and the Hanafiyya. Right? However, both some Shafi'is and some Hanafis, as well as many, and the Hanbali school, of course, they occupy this significant minority. Don't put it into percentages, but if you were, it might even be like a 40% kind of thing, right? It's a significant amount that consider it to be obligatory. So the majority, just about over half, consider this to be a sunnah. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the evidence is for them. This hadith about 27 times 1, the validating the prayer by itself. Go back and check the lessons, right? So their evidence have been established. The problem is that the position of the Hanbali school is very strong. It's really difficult to argue with it. Congregational prayer seems to be very, very obligatory. All right. Then you've got that very kind of extreme opinion, tiny opinion, which has some Hanbalis in it, has obviously Ibn Aqil, has Ibn Taymiyyah, according to what seems to be the strongest position from him. Is of course Ibn Hazm's position and the Zahiriyya position, which is that no, it goes even further. The congregation is a condition of the prayer, not just obligation, condition of the prayer. You heard this mid opinion between sunnah and fard, is that it's a fard kifaya. Fard kifaya means that as long as people are establishing it, then it is okay. Now here's the problem. People getting mixed up between, are we talking about congregation or are we talking about attending the masjid for congregation? Okay? This opinion of fard kifaya, which means that as long as someone is doing it, then you don't have to do it, doesn't make any sense for the congregation prayer in principle. It only makes sense for the masjid. And that's why some of the scholars said that what Ibn Taymiyyah was saying is that the congregation is obligatory and it's a shart of the prayer in one position, and then he said fard kifaya to attend the masjid for it. So he's saying that the basic asl of the prayer, some scholars said that, and I have to say that I find this explanation interesting. This is trying to reconcile Ibn Taymiyyah's two statements on the issue. So if he says that it is a shart, which is clearly narrated from him, then this is referring to the prayer in general, wherever it is, whenever it is. This means the prayer and, in principle. Okay? In principle, it has to be offered in congregation, wherever it is, whoever it is, however it is. The best form of doing that is in the masjid, absolutely no doubt. And that's a fard kifaya, meaning that you don't have to, as long as someone else is doing it. But if nobody else is doing it, then not only is it a condition for the prayer, but you got to offer it in the masjid as well. But if someone is offering it in the masjid, then you're okay with it at home, because it's only fard kifaya. So that's why I don't want you to think about fard kifaya as a viable option or a discussion point in the issue of congregation. In congregation, you should think of it as a sunnah mu'akkada, like the majority of scholars, Hanafi, Shafi'is mostly, Malikis a little bit. That it's an obligation. You have to pray the prayer in congregation. You are not allowed. You are sinful every time you pray the prayer at home. It's a lack of effort. It's a lack of intent. It's just laziness. Yeah, that's the argument. and the evidences which are pretty yani. And then the final position, which is that it's a shart. We can take shart out. We just refuted that. The sunnah argument is not the greatest. It's a possibility, but it's not the greatest. Then you're left with the obligation. Do I feel comfortable for the class position, meaning my own position, that it should be seen as an obligation? I don't feel comfortable with it. I'll also put forward that the scholars that you see that state that it is obligatory, you also find some statements from them which are kind of slightly contradictory to their own held position. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah, we're going to come to this in a second, but Sheikh Uthaymeen, for example, he gave an example once of the civil service, or like the town hall, or where government structure is situated and the different departments that are operating there. And he said that when you got different departments of a government, whatever, they will obviously have a prayer room. Muslim country, they'd have a prayer room in a thingy, but there's masajid all around the building. He goes that, do they have to go out to the masjid? And he said, he eventually said no, but they have to pray in congregation inside the house, inside the building. So he seems to be lenient on the issue that it has to be absolutely offered in the mosque, even though he considers it an obligation. But then he will say, but for them, because if they go and so on and so forth, then there's going to be some problems. People are not going to get work done, and the government's going to start to collapse. So no, they can pray in the government department, in the office, basically. You can pray in the office, but it's got to be offered in congregation. So you sometimes see some laxity here and there, even though that's not referring to the congregation as such. I'll be honest with you, I don't have the confidence to put upon other people my personal opinion, which is that it is a sunnah mu'akkada, right? And I prefer the position of obligatory. That a prayer must be offered in congregation as much as humanly possible. Okay? But we still have another section that we need to cover. I shouldn't really have answered that question. Okay? Because we need to clarify a further aspect, which is that the statement in the text, he can perform it in his house. It's already assumed that a woman is praying it in her house, and the congregation is not is a requirement for the women. It's not a requirement for women. So let's just finish off that part, okay? Which is that, and it's okay for him to offer it at home, i.e. for people, i.e. to pray in congregation at home, okay? So even if the masjid is close, then it's allowed to pray at home, even though to pray in the masjid is obviously so much better, but it's permissible for them to pray at home as long as you've got two people, even if one is a woman, meaning mum, wife, daughter, then you pray both together and don't go to the masjid. The evidence for this is those scholars that established this opinion. They said the evidence for this is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, جُعِلَتْ لِي الْأَرْضُ كُلَّهَا مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا, that the earth for me has been made a masjid and a purifier. Masjidan wa tahura. Masjidan means a place of prayer, meaning we can pray everywhere, and tahura, meaning that it's earth, the earth it purifies, like in tayammum, it's a purifier. So this is something specific for the ummah, okay? Hadith sahih. So the Sheikh says that these scholars, they said the earth is all a masjid, and by that, if you say masjid, then that means jama'ah, so therefore the jama'ah can be established anywhere. That's the I gotta say this is a weak argument, yeah, but anyway, so the jama'ah can be established anywhere, alright? Because masjid is everywhere, not just masjid in the actual masjid, it says masjid whatever. Now of course the translation of this hadith should be, masjid actually means where the place where you do sujood, right? That's what masjid means. So the correct interpretation of this hadith is that the whole earth has been made a place where prostration can be offered, right? And also it can be used to purify. That's their main evidence. Other scholars said There was something I wanted to read to you guys actually. And that is here. What Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar Shanqiti said. Is it lagging, yeah? No data. So, just so that you know, I didn't say anything, okay? I noticed the lag as well. I noticed that so I didn't actually cover anything in that lag or that break, just so that you're aware. But I noticed that the stream went down for a second. Very strange. Okay, that's good. So, one of the other evidences, by the way, I just want to mention that Ibn Taymiyyah, just so that I can keep the evidences together. One of the evidences that Ibn Taymiyyah and other of the Zahiriyya and so on, Ibn Aqil and so on, that they use to consider the prayer to be a shart, meaning a condition for the prayer, is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ as narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas and collected by Ibn Majah. من سمع النداء فلم يأتي فلا صلاة له إلا من عذر, that whoever hears the call to prayer and doesn't attend, then there is no prayer for him, except if he has an excuse. This is, of course, the main hadith that Ibn Taymiyyah used. He said that this whole thing is all about excuses. So whoever hears the prayer, hears the call to prayer and doesn't attend, then there is no prayer for him. And their argument is, of course, that there's no prayer. Now, the response of the majority that said no, they said, number one, this hadith is weak, which it is. They said, number two, even if the hadith is not weak, then la salah means that no complete prayer. That is not a complete prayer. It's not a perfect prayer. It's a prayer with deficiency. That's what you expect really, to be honest. Anyway, let's just cover this. So I told you what the evidence is of those scholars is that those that said that the prayer can be offered at home because everywhere has been made a place of sajda. Yeah. And Shaykh Uthaymeen says, and some of the people of knowledge, they said that إلى أن كونها في المسجد من فروض الكفايات. They said that to go to the prayer, to go to the masjid prayer is from the fard kifaya. So وأنه إذا قام بها من يكفي سقطت عن الباقين. So the point is that as long as someone in the mosque prays the prayer, that congregational prayer is a fard kifaya. Someone's got to do it. The system's got to continue. Islam's got to be there on the outside. People are going to be calling for the prayer and attending the prayer, and as long as they're praying, then the rest can pray at home as long as they pray in congregation. This is now just about location now. That's now not, we're assuming congregation now, everything congregation. Now we're just debating location. Does it have to be in a mosque or does it have to be at home? So that's another. Some of the other scholars, they said, وَذَهَبَ آخَرُونَ, others said that you must offer this in the masjid. Every single person that is obligated to attend the congregation prayer or do the prayer in congregation, i.e. men, have to offer it in the masjid. Okay? وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّهَا فَرْضٌ كِفَايَةٌ. As for those people, to go back to those people that said that it is a communal obligation, it's a fard kifaya, alright? They said that this is from the Sha'air al-Islam al-Zahira. They basically said that this is something from the obvious signs and it's got to continue. So as long as it continues, then we're good. But it has to continue. And it has to be, if all the masjids shut down and nobody attends a masjid, then basically there's no sign of Islam in that country. So it has to be kept up. And of course the people are fought. That's the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you don't hear the adhan in a place, then you can fight. This is in wartime, right? So from the instructions of war is that you come upon a new area, you don't know whether it's a Muslim area or an enemy area, and so in terms of collateral damage, collateral killing and killing of innocents, it's tough to be asking questions, and the whole point of attack is to surprise and attack and lay hate everybody. The idea is that if you hear the adhan in an area, then that place is a no-go area. Even if they're kuffar amongst them, you've got to be very careful because this is a Muslim area. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if there's no adhan, meaning that you can't hear any adhan, then that's the basic assumption, that's a non-Muslim area, go ahead, and that is an area of attack. That's why the adhan and these external signs of Islam are so important. So they're saying that, listen, the prayer to be established in the mosque is that important. But as long as someone's doing it, then it doesn't now need to be done by the rest, and the rest of us can now pray by ourselves at home, by pray at home in congregation. In congregation. As for those that said it must be offered in the masjid, they said, because the Prophet ﷺ said, the previous hadith, that I really was... Yeah, I'm going to finish this section, Mesa. I want to do another page in a bit. Because we've been on this obligation thing for like 3 weeks, man. So I want to speak about now the other people. So yeah, it'll be done in about 5 minutes, inshallah. 10 minutes, maybe 5. I really wanted to command for the prayer to be someone to lead the prayer, okay? And I go and find those people. إِلَىٰ قَوْمٍ لَا يَشْهُدُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. I go and find those people who are not attending the prayer, and I burn down their houses with fire. Yeah? This hadith that we spoke about. Yeah? And these scholars that said that to pray in the masjid is obligatory, they said, have you seen how the Prophet ﷺ said, qawmun, people? He didn't say those, he said those people that need to establish the prayer. Okay? Sheikh says, جمع تحصل بهم الجماعة فلو أمكن أن يصلوا في بيوتهم جماعة لقال إلا أن يصلوا في بيوتهم. Yeah, this is a good point. He basically says that the Prophet ﷺ said qawm, people, numbers of people. A number of people, think about this is a subtle point. If you say, I want to go and find these people who are not attending the Jama'ah, a group of people can establish their own congregation because it's a group of people. The Prophet ﷺ did not add a disclaimer and did not say a group of people who are not establishing the prayer at home, I'm going to go and burn their houses. He just said a group of people. Now, a group of people maybe be establishing the prayer at home in congregation. But the Prophet ﷺ said, when he said that, that I go to these people who are not attending the prayer and I burn their houses down with fire, that are not attending the prayer. He, like, ignoring the fact whether they prayed at home by themselves or in congregation, the crime is that they didn't attend the prayer. Not that they didn't pray in congregation, that they didn't attend the prayer. This is a very strong evidence. And Sheikh says this is the correct position. This is a correct position. And it's obligatory to offer the prayer in the masjid. And if it is established outside of the masjid or other than the masjid, then they are sinful, even though the prayer is valid according to the strongest opinion. Even though the prayer is valid, but because they didn't pray in the masjid, it is sinful. He goes, as for our response to the people who said that it's only from the external signs of Islam, not something... When those people who are arguing for it to say that this is only a communal obligation, and that it's only from the external signs, the whole idea is that it's for the external signs, so as long as someone makes an external sign, it's not something from our individual contract with Allah, right? The fard ayn means that it's required from us, but fard kifaya means that it's something which is just on the outsides, it's just something to be seen, as opposed to required for us individually. Shaykh Uthaymeen goes, as for those people, all right, he goes, if we were to go by this, if we were to follow this opinion of fard kifaya to the masjid, is only going to the masjid is only fard kifaya, every single person will remain at home, because everyone would say, yeah, I'm sure there's someone else who was taking this seriously. Everyone would assume that the other guy is doing it. Everyone's going to end up praying at home. It's a disaster, he goes. So no, we can't make this argument that it's only from the external matters. No, everyone's got to have that concern, and the only way you're going to have that concern to go is if you consider it to be individually obligatory. And then he goes, as for the people who said that the masjid has been, that the earth has been made for me a masjid and a purifier, okay, then there's no evidence in this aslan. He goes, فَلَا دَلِيلٌ فِي aslan. He goes, where's evidence here? What are you talking about? Because this is just indicating that the whole earth is a masjid. And that's something which is specific to this ummah, unlike other ummah, unlike other nations, like the Jews and Christians. They've got to pray in synagogues and churches. They're restricted to their houses of worship, whereas us, we can worship outside everywhere else. Okay? We've got all places. Congregation is not being intended, Shaykh Uthaymeen says, by this hadith. It's the prayer itself which is being intended. And I agree with that. I agree with that. Definitely. That's why we translate that. We don't say that it's a masjid. We say it's a place of worship or a place of prostration. The earth has been made a place of prostration everywhere, meaning that pray outside, pray on the dirt, pray on the pavement, it's all good. Yeah? Sheikh goes, there's no debate in this interpretation. Where they're getting that from, la niza'a fi. There's where they're getting this idea from, no idea. Okay? ثم على فرض أنه عام. And if we were to say that it is just a general ruling, it can be a congregation everywhere, it doesn't matter. Sheikh says the evidence is clearly specified to the masjid. Then he gives that example of the government offices. And he says that now if there were some government offices and there's a whole load of people working in there and the masajid are outside, and they say that we can't go and attend that main jama'ah because then there will be no one offering government services and the civilians will be harmed and the government structure will be harmed. So Shaykh Uthaymeen says, okay, well in this case then, and he also said something interesting which I found funny. He goes that, a lot of the people, once you tell the authorities that we're going to the jama'ah, that's it, Once the authorities allow you to do that, then people are getting off home, people are doing dilly-dallying, getting lunch, this, that, whatever. They're using the blag of the jama'ah to actually escape. And he goes, if this is going to lead to, absenteeism and going to lead to laziness and whatever, then what is in the interest of the employees and the government and for the people, the citizens, is to establish the prayer in their own office. But then he adds this, he goes that the congregation's got to be a singular one, it's got to be a main one, and he goes they should make the hall that they're praying in have an entrance to the outside so that the people can enter, so that it's almost like a masjid, so that it's seen like basically a masjid. But you can see that he's kind of weakening a little bit, or not really, being a little bit lenient on this position. Then he says, Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Now I just want to add something what Shaykh Muhammad Mukhtar al-Shanqiti says to complete this section. He goes that this idea that the prayer is obligatory is only for people who are not traveling. Those who are traveling, he said, are not under this, right? He says, and I'm going to read what he says, which I think is very interesting. And so Shaykh Muhammad Mukhtar al-Shanqiti, he says that some scholars said that as long as this is pretty much similar to what we just said a minute ago, which is that the prayer is fard kifaya in the masjid. He goes that if him not attending the masjid is not going to harm the masjid, meaning that the prayer will still be established and people will still come and there's a proper congregation, but just you not being there is not going to cause a problem, then it's allowed for him to pray as long as he prays in jama'ah at home. Okay? And they use the hadith of the one that we covered before, when the Prophet ﷺ saw the two people come in from their homes, didn't pray the Fajr Jama'ah, right? They sat down, and then the Prophet ﷺ then said to them, why did you do that? Why didn't you pray with us, the Jama'ah? Why did you not do that? And they said, we've already prayed in our homes. We've already prayed in our homes. And the Prophet ﷺ said, don't do that again. Don't do what again? Don't do what again? Don't pray in your homes again? Or don't sit by the side in a masjid when you attend and there's a congregational prayer that's going on. Join it. That becomes a nafil for you. Right? The one that you did is only any status, and that one is its own status. You must attend the prayer. You must perform the prayer. So Sheikh says that Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar said that the scholars who use this argument, their angle is that they left the jama'ah of the masjid because of the jama'ah at home. And the Prophet ﷺ did not criticize them for that. He criticized them for not praying in front of the people. Shaykh Uthaymeen then he closes and he says, إن هذا لا يفهم صلاة الرجل في أهله وإنما هو وارد في صلاة سفر. He goes, some scholars explained this, the hadith though, they reconciled this hadith with others, and they said that no, this is only referring to those who are on a journey. The Prophet ﷺ was in Khif, yani, meaning near Mina, okay, and therefore they were traveling when this happened, and therefore this was considered to be an exception for traveling, and not something which is applicable at home. And therefore Sheikh Uthaymeen says, Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar Shankiti, my apologies, says that in conclusion we will say that إن المسافر لا تجب عليه الجماعة إن كان يصلي في so that we will say that the traveler is not obligated to pray the prayer in congregation due to the difficulties of travel and out of ease for him, but the one who's alone at home, ones who's resident, they have to pray, and it's an obligation. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Now, that's the end. What I want to say is this. This is about as difficult an issue that I have. The prayer in congregation and the prayer being in the masjid. Now, you guys know, that for me personally now, on a personal level, that I take this very strictly, and people don't like how strict I take it. I give a lot of people a lot of problems over it, and so on and so forth. And I just think that there's so many things that are based upon this, and I think that at the practical level everybody needs to understand this ruling in this way, that it is an obligation to perform the prayer in congregation, and that it is obligatory to go to the masjid for the men. And you've seen me say many times before that a man is not a man that does not pray the prayer in the masjid, especially the Fajr prayer. Okay? Now, temporary things and temporary kind of uncertainty, instability, illness, some reasons, that's okay, that's fine. But in principle, that's what should happen. It's important for that person's deen and their development. It's important for the rest of the people. The jama'ah is the asl of every good that we have. The masjid that we have, all of the good comes from the masjid in our community. All of it. And it's got to be the base, and people have become way too lazy on this. And that's why, even though in my heart I feel that both the congregation is also a highly emphasized sunnah, and to pray in the masjid is also a highly emphasized sunnah, I do believe that that's a very risky position to hold, even legitimately. I don't even apply it to myself, right? Meaning that I would consider myself that if I was lazy, then I've done something wrong, right? And I think that we should understand this ruling as an obligation. And so my class position is that we stick to Sheikh Uthaymeen's position, that it is obligatory to perform the prayer in congregation as much as one is possible to do, and to attend the masjid as much as one is possible to do. I say as much as possible to do because if Sheikh Uthaymeen's asked various questions, he's going to give fatwas to say maybe that's okay, maybe that's okay. But in principle, he's not giving any excuses. And look at these people here about the government department who are saying, no, you got to make your own mosque and all this kind of behavior. I believe that's a position that we should establish. However, I'd also accept that, how on earth would the world work like that? It's just very difficult. The people who are working, for example, people who are working in non-Muslim countries that don't have this kind of situation, what would they do? It doesn't fit with the general system. So I think academically and I think legally, we need to understand this to be an obligation. I think practically speaking, I think it's possible for us to know that there are exceptions on the odd moment here and there. All of us need to, though, individually treat it. What we say to other people is one thing, but we need to treat it as an obligation. Every single student of knowledge should be attending the Jama'ah. Absolutely, all the time, regularly. Sisters, I like the fact that they do so as well, but it's not required from them. Yeah? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. If we say, Rafiq says, if we say it's Fard Kifaya, what will be the minimum number of attendees? That's the problem. That's going to come in the next couple of weeks. What does it mean to harm the masjid? What does it mean to, that will come in the next few lessons and so on. Okay. All right. Are we done, folks? Alhamdulillah, I think No questions, inshallah. Bilal asks, Marina wants to watch this. It's not a tutorial, man. I was just so excited. I said, listen, people need to know this madness. That's the problem, man. The comments. I never knew this thing existed. And then I saw this comment on the thing when I discovered the steam iron. The steam iron, by the way, has been upstairs for like 6 months. Yeah, I didn't even know that it was a steam iron. Then I used it and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. I just gathered all this washing. It'd been 5 months washing had gathered up. Can you believe that? And I didn't even know the concept of creases. Then I found out creases, they get more set in, I think, when you leave them. And that if you iron clothes when they come out of the thing. And I didn't know any of this bakwas. So then when I put that on, then people were saying that, have you heard of Fulan and Lazenby and la di da blah di blah and this and that and condensing heat loop tumble dryers that make iron. All bakwas, man, my head was gone. Then I saw the steamer. I said, what a sick idea. So then I got it, and yeah, so it was not a tutorial. So this example would be an example of a legitimate excuse that would not be considered sinful. So I mean, yeah, that's yeah. You know when scholars are trying to say something without saying something, this is one of those basically. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? What is the ruling for Jum'ah Salah when Eid day is a Friday? Is it Fard Kifaya or obligatory for all? Well, these are off-topic questions, man. That's coming in its own place. But no, I don't think that you need to go to the Jum'ah prayer if you pray Eid prayer. Why especially the Fajr? Because, Chaudhry, not opposed to the others. The most important prayers are the Fajr and the Isha in the masjid. No doubt about that. The Prophet ﷺ said that only the munafiqeen do not attend those prayers. There's so much hadith about the masjid, and we've got to go to the masjid. But Fajr and Isha specifically is not just always a lazy packy doesn't come. That's a sign of the munafiqeen who don't come to those two prayers. And out of these two prayers, Fajr separates the wheat from the chaff. Yeah? Fajr differentiates the believers from wastemen. That's a fact. Now that's of course notwithstanding excuses. People might have some legitimate excuse, that's fine. Some work or some very, very late night because of a legitimate reason, blah, blah, blah. That's something else. I'm not interested in that. Yeah? But in principle, we're talking about Fajr is everything in the masjid. It's a proper prayer, proper sacrifice, proper start to the day, proper people do it. Fajr is the start point of everything great. Wait till you discover actual steamers, the ones that don't even need the iron part. So someone also in the thingy posted the system, the steamer system, which is like a little mini cupboard that's on wheels. That's bakwas, man. That doesn't do anything for me because it's only good for shirts. How would I put a thobe in there? Bakwas, innit? Sheikh Shanqiti's conclusion, Sumaira says, for the muqim jama'ah obligation in masjid. Yeah, masjid, yeah. He considers it to be obligatory in the masjid as well. After going through the lessons, I still feel a bit confused about doing scheduled qiyams independently. You shouldn't. You should avoid it. Huh? Wait, scheduled qiyams independently. Am I allowed to wake up every night at a certain time to pray qiyam? Oh, of course you are. Of course you are. Of course, 100% that's preferred. That's you yourself by yourself. Absolutely 100%. That's sunnah. That's a great act. Can be the same exact time for all the rest of your life. Non-lesson related. This is the last question of the day. Given some of the ethical issues associated with companies like Tesla, what do you think in terms of purchasing stocks in such companies, providing they pass Islamic accounting screening? Well, so the second part answers your first part. Obviously, the ethical issues are being controlled by Islamic screening, right? So if it passes, then it means that the ethical issues aren't so much, or they are to be mitigated. I personally think Tesla is okay. The problem is that when you start to now consider something's haram because it works in China, or it works in Uyghur territory, or it works in X, or it works in Y, you're going to get in big trouble with your entire life, right? The American state, this, that. Are we going to now boycott everything Russia now, for example? You're going to boycott your flipping gas? Yeah? You've got to be careful about making things of haram upon yourself that you can't handle. You get what I'm saying? Why do women get any extra ajr? Do women get any extra ajr for praying in congregation? I think so. I think that if they make the attempt to pray congregation, I think that they will get that extra reward. But I don't think that it is, in principle, something that needs to be done. Okay? And the habit of going to the masjid to listen to the recitation in congregational prayer when menstruating, I don't think should be a habit because it's not narrated from the female companions. But if a person did that, I think it's allowed as long as she's not taking up any kind of space or place of other people. Ice cubes in the dryer helps with removing wrinkles. That is an interesting one. I need some evidence for that. Bilal, go ahead on the Telegram. My boy Ijaz. Ijaz has been, mashallah, around in the scene. Blast from the past. Blast from the past. Fajr in Jama'ah has an associated perceived difficulty with it that's often deeply set in people's minds. Once a person works through this, they find it really isn't. And it's important we keep reminding each other of this. Absolutely couldn't say that any better myself. You unlock Fajr, you unlock life. I've always said that the one who prays Fajr will just smash everything in life. Fajr in Jama'ah, I'm telling you straight, I only know champions that pray Fajr in Jama'ah. They are winners in life. And I don't mean it has to be necessarily, like I'll give you an example. My Fajr buddies in Longside, which is an entirely different working class demographic, and Makki Masjid when it was in the end of the 90s, and then in the thingy, they were winners in their deen, in the sukoon of their house, in the quality of their whatever. I'm not talking old folks who've got nothing better to do, but I mean the younger folks, yeah. And then when I came to like Cheadle, and then obviously people more wealthy, or whatever, professionals, much more. I'm being very obviously general here, stereotypical, and I found that the people who are praying the Fajr in Jama'ah are smashing deen with their personal life, in their professions as well, in their businesses as well, whatnot. So just generally, the same goes for Egypt. I found that the same goes for every country that I've lived and stayed in and studied in. Smash Fajr, you smash everything. Honestly, Fajr Jama'ah is a sign of intent. It's a warning to Shaitan that you are finished, son. You are not going up against normal gravy here. You are, this is alpha territory now. And I listen, I cover this in Check This House. So you guys must have seen that. And I say about the women, you lot are very dodgy if you are not kicking your man out to the masjid. You're not doing the bestie of your husband when he's praying at home and doing that dodgy prayer. You should do his bestie proper. 100%. You've got, and you can do it the nice way, and love and rewards and all the rest of it. Okay? Alright? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khair. Night, this Saturday night, everybody here in UK, by hook or crook, make sure you're down to Birmingham. Make sure you're there by 6 o'clock. I'm going to start bang on time. We've got lots of content to get through. Lots of content. It's going to be great, inshallah. Aqsa, about. That's about it. All right. Someone put the Telegram group link up. So those who are not in Telegram group need to be on Telegram group. Guys, we need to put that every group. Shazad Mesa, every lesson, Telegram group link. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah. Don't fight anybody. Don't get divorced over it. Okay? Keep it in the thingy. Let me dial that back. I think you understood what I mean. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa astaghfiruka Allahumma wa atubu ilayka. Are we pro Shaz? Shaz? No, Shaz has been good this week.